What if I told you that one of the most powerful tools for fighting cancer isn't found in a pharmacy? It's something you can do in your living room, in just 10 minutes. I'm talking about exercise, but not the hour-long gym sessions you might be picturing. New research suggests that brief bursts of intense activity can trigger profound changes at the cellular level. Today, we're exploring a groundbreaking 2026 study that reveals how short, intense workouts may activate your body's own cancer-fighting mechanisms. The findings are remarkable. Imagine this. You hop on an exercise bike, pedal hard for 10 minutes, and during that time, your body switches on more than 1,300 genes that help repair your DNA. Genes that help shut down the signals cancer cells use to grow and spread. That's not science fiction. That's what researchers have now documented in human blood samples. And here's what makes this particularly relevant. The study focused on colorectal cancer, which is the third most common cancer worldwide and one of the most preventable through lifestyle choices. So let's look at what the science actually shows, who it applies to, and how you might be able to use this information to support your own health. Some important background. The connection between exercise and reduced cancer risk isn't new. Decades of research have shown that physically active people tend to have lower rates of many cancers. But until recently, we didn't really understand why. What is it about moving your body that makes your cells more resistant to cancer? The mechanisms were unclear. This new study, published in January 2026 in the International Journal of Cancer, provides some of the clearest molecular evidence we've seen. It shows us the actual genetic switches being flipped. The researchers recruited 30 volunteers between the ages of 50 and 78. All participants were classified as overweight or obese, which is significant because this population faces elevated cancer risk. These weren't elite athletes or fitness enthusiasts. These were regular people, many of whom hadn't exercised intensely in years. That makes the results even more compelling for the average person. Each participant completed a single session of intense cycling. Just 10 to 12 minutes at high effort. Before and after the workout, researchers collected blood samples to analyze what changed. What they found was striking. The exercise didn't just raise heart rates and burn calories. It triggered a cascade of molecular changes that reached deep into how genes are expressed. Before we go further, an important note. This is a single study with a relatively small sample size. It shows association and mechanism, but more research is needed to confirm long-term protection. That said, the findings align with a broader body of evidence linking physical activity to cancer prevention. So let's examine exactly what happens in your body during those 10 minutes. When you exercise intensely, your muscles release special molecules called exerkines. Think of these as chemical messengers that travel through your bloodstream, sending signals to cells throughout your body. The study identified 13 specific proteins that increased significantly after just 10 minutes of intense cycling. These proteins act as signals that tell your cells to activate protective mechanisms. One of the most important proteins that increased was interleukin-6, or IL-6. Despite its reputation as an inflammatory marker, IL-6, released during exercise, actually helps repair damaged DNA in your cells. Here's where it gets really interesting. The researchers took the exercise-conditioned blood and exposed it to colorectal cancer cells in the laboratory to see what would happen. The blood collected after exercise activated more than 1,300 genes in the cancer cells. That's over 1,300 genetic switches being flipped by a 10-minute workout. Among the most significant changes was the activation of a gene called PNKP. This gene produces an enzyme that's essential for repairing breaks in your DNA strands. DNA damage happens constantly in our cells from oxidative stress, radiation, and normal metabolism. Your body's repair mechanisms are your first line of defense against cancer development. When DNA damage goes unrepaired, it can lead to mutations that eventually allow cells to grow uncontrollably. That's essentially how cancer begins at the molecular level. The exercise-conditioned blood didn't just activate repair genes. It also suppressed genes associated with rapid cell growth and proliferation, essentially telling cancer cells to slow down. Think about what this means. In just 10 minutes, your workout releases molecules that simultaneously repair cellular damage and put the brakes on uncontrolled cell growth. The researchers noted that these changes happened rapidly and were measurable immediately after the exercise session. Your body responds quickly when you challenge it physically. It's worth noting that the study used intense exercise, meaning the participants were working at high effort levels. This wasn't a leisurely stroll. It was challenging enough to elevate heart rate significantly. For context, the participants cycled at around 90% of their maximum effort. That's the kind of exertion where you're breathing hard and couldn't easily hold a conversation. Colorectal cancer is particularly responsive to lifestyle interventions. Studies consistently show that diet, weight management, and physical activity all influence risk levels. Colorectal cancer affects about 1 in 23 people over their lifetime. It's the third most diagnosed cancer and the second leading cause of cancer death worldwide. What makes this study significant is that it shows exercise benefits even in people who are already at elevated risk due to their weight. It's not too late to start seeing protective effects. The participants ranged from 50 to 78 years old. This age group has the highest incidence of colorectal cancer, making prevention strategies particularly valuable. The study authors emphasized that these acute changes represent the body's immediate response to exercise. Whether this translates to lasting protection requires longer-term research. However, the mechanism makes biological sense. If each exercise session activates repair genes and suppresses growth signals, regular exercise would provide repeated protective episodes. The researchers are now planning follow-up studies to test whether repeated exercise sessions produce cumulative benefits and how these changes might interact with cancer treatments. One particularly promising direction is understanding whether exercise could enhance the effectiveness of chemotherapy or help patients recover better between treatment sessions. Previous research has suggested that cancer patients who exercise during treatment often experience better outcomes and fewer side effects. This study helps explain why that might be. The exerkines released during exercise don't just affect cancer cells. They influence metabolism, inflammation, immune function, and brain health. Exercise is truly whole-body medicine. What's elegant about this research is that it identifies specific molecular players. We're not just saying exercise is good. We can now point to IL-6, PNKP, and other measurable factors. This molecular understanding opens doors for future therapies. Could we someday develop treatments that mimic exercise's effects for people who physically cannot exercise? The research points that direction. For now, though, the most accessible and proven way to trigger these protective changes is simply to move your body vigorously. Your muscles are essentially a pharmacy you carry with you. The study also raises interesting questions about exercise timing. Would morning exercise provide different benefits than evening exercise? The current study didn't address this. Similarly, we don't yet know whether the type of exercise matters. This study used cycling, but would running, swimming, or resistance training produce similar exerkine profiles? What we do know is that the intensity seems to matter. Light activity may have other benefits, but these dramatic genetic changes were observed with vigorous effort. So what does this mean for you practically? If you're looking to maximize cancer protective benefits, consider incorporating brief high-intensity sessions into your routine. You don't need an hour. 10 to 12 minutes of challenging exercise, where you're breathing hard and sweating, may be enough to trigger these protective molecular changes. What counts as intense enough? Activities like cycling with resistance, brisk uphill walking, climbing stairs quickly, or interval training all fit the bill for most people. If you're new to exercise or have been sedentary, start gradually. Even working up to 10 minutes of moderate intensity is a step in the right direction for overall health. For those over 50, this research is particularly relevant, but it applies across ages. Building the habit now may provide protection for decades to come. Remember, consistency matters more than perfection. The researchers are studying whether repeated sessions create cumulative benefits. Regular short workouts may beat occasional long ones. A simple approach. Set a timer for 10 minutes, exercise at a challenging pace, then cool down. You could do this before breakfast, during a lunch break, or after work. If gym equipment isn't accessible, bodyweight exercises work too. Burpees, jumping jacks, high knees, or simply running in place can elevate your heart rate to the needed levels. Track your exertion level. You should feel like you're working at about 8 or 9 out of 10. Talking should be difficult. That's the intensity zone where exerkines flow. And critically, if you have existing health conditions, heart problems, or haven't exercised in years, consult your doctor before starting any high-intensity exercise program. This research is promising, but it's not a prescription. It's information to discuss with your healthcare provider as part of your overall wellness strategy. Also remember that exercise is just one piece of the puzzle. Healthy diet, maintaining a reasonable weight, limiting alcohol, and regular cancer screenings all matter too. For colorectal cancer specifically, screenings like colonoscopies save lives by catching problems early. Don't skip these just because you're exercising. Both are important. What excites researchers about this study is the accessibility of the intervention. You don't need expensive equipment, gym memberships, or hours of free time. 10 minutes. That's less time than most people spend scrolling social media. It's less time than making a meal, and it may trigger over 1,000 protective genetic changes. The study authors put it simply: short bursts of hard exercise release molecules into the bloodstream that switch on DNA repair and switch off cancer growth signals. That's a powerful message in an era when many people feel they don't have time for lengthy workouts. Brief intensity may be more protective than long, leisurely sessions. Of course, any exercise is better than none. If high intensity feels impossible, moderate activity still provides benefits for cardiovascular health, mental wellness, and overall longevity. But for those specifically interested in maximizing the cancer protective effects, this research suggests intensity matters. Push yourself when you can, within safe limits. To summarize, a 2026 study found that 10 minutes of intense exercise triggers more than 1,300 gene changes that activate DNA repair and suppress cancer cell growth. The research focused on colorectal cancer in adults 50 and older, but the underlying mechanisms likely apply more broadly. Exercise releases protective exerkines that benefit your whole body. If there's one takeaway from today's episode, it's this: you don't need hours at the gym to see benefits. 10 focused minutes may be one of the best investments you can make in your health. Remember, always consult your doctor before starting new exercise programs, especially intense ones. But for most people, this research offers genuine hope that small efforts can yield big protection. Until next time, Keep moving, stay curious about the science, and take care of yourself. This has been Better Health Faster, bringing you the research that matters.